Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for asking the question. Mr. Speaker, said the virement and redeployment processes have always been a feature of our budget system, not just in this budget, and provides the operational flexibility. I'm coming to that for budget execution, but within a proper legal framework to ensure proper management, including cabinet approval for redeployment of funds. The reason why I'm saying this at the beginning, Mr. Speaker, because what the honourable member has done, by giving statements outside of this House, suggests that somehow, this is not allowable. The virement is a process used for the.
Mr. Speaker, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I'm coming to
Point
what she's
of order,
asking,
Mr.
but I
Speaker,
need to.
Sir. Point of order.
What's your point of order?
Misrepresentation. I would like to ask him to produce that statement where I have said this is not allowed. I challenge him to produce that, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you. My ruling is that he's still coming around.
I said, Mr. Speaker, the impression that is created, yes, what she said. Virement is a process used for the transfer of budgeted funds from one appropriation category to another appropriate account with the agency's head appropriation. They don't want to listen, Mr. Speaker, because it's important for me to explain to them. During the stupidity is coming from you like nobody's business, Why don't you listen? Mr. Speaker said designation persons are provided the authority. It is important, Mr. Speaker, for the people outside of this House to also understand, and also the people in this House. Designated persons are provided the authority to transfer budgeted funds within the agency's head of appropriation. For example, under Section 16 of the Financial Management Act 2004, states that if the minister is satisfied that it is necessary to wire, the minister may, in writing, with or without further appropriation than this Act, authorize the transfer of an unspent amount in an appropriation category with a head of appropriation administered by a budget sector agency to another appropriation category within the head of appropriation. The Minister of Finance powers under Section 16 of the FMA 2004 is delegated to the Permanent Secretaries under Section 10 of the Financial Instructions 2010, Mr. Speaker, said to transfer funds within an appropriate category as well. So, Mr. Speaker, say, apart from virement redeployment, this process allows the Minister of Finance, with the approval of Cabinet, to authorize redeployment amounts appropriate by the appropriated Act in force for administration by the Ministry to the heads of appropriation and appropriation categories to be administered by one or more other budget sectors. So, Mr. Speaker, say, this is the first time, unlike when they were in government, you never hear the Cabinet make a decision which was made public. This is the first time that when the redeployment goes to Cabinet, it is put out for public information by the Honourable Prime Minister. And they use that to say, some kind of funny thing is going because funds are being redeployed. It's nothing funny about redeployment, Mr. Speaker. And I'll give you examples. And I'll give you examples of what happened during the Fiji first raid. I'll give you examples. So, Mr. Speaker, for the 2023-2024 budget, the first redeployment of funds amounted to 105.2 million was to meet the additional expenditure demands for the following agencies and ministries. And we said very clearly, we didn't come with a revised budget. We looked at the budget, we looked at the expenditure, we redeployed funds, $105.2 million, to meet the new priorities of the new government. The deployment, Mr. Speaker, included the Republic of Fiji Military Forces, the Ministry of Home Affairs and Immigration, the Ministry of Multi-Ethnic Affairs, Water Authority of Fiji. These were entities where the funds went to. Fiji Roads Authority, a sum of 36.1 million is to cater for the following commitments. 21.5 million for additional restoration works on the road network, which was not there when we came in. FRA's budget, whole year's budget, Mr. Speaker, was spent in 6 months. And we had to come and redeploy funds from other ministries to capital expenditure to fix roads. 14.6 million from that deployment for the completion of capital projects designated for that year because they had not budgeted properly. That's why we redeployed. The second redeployment because your question says why from capital to others. The second redeployment exercise of 7.9 million was undertaken to meet the funding shortfall, as we said quite clearly, the Ministry of Education. And 1.8 for the Ministry of Education was to cater for the cost of salaries and allowances for teachers in ECE. Similarly, the Fiji Police Force had encountered a funding shortfall of 6.1 million to meet the salary cost for police officers and payment of allowances. Mr. Speaker said it is important to note that the redeployment exercise that was undertaken in the 2023-24 budget, the overall expenditure is well within the total appropriation approved by Parliament. Actual expenditure stands at 4.1 billion, which is below the budgeted expenditure of 4.3 billion. So there is no overspending as a whole of government, as was the impression created. In fact, the overall net deficit is around 3.3% for last financial year, lower than 4.8% as budgeted. And this is underpinned by strong tax collections, revenue collections, and government meeting the revenue forecast for the first time, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to reiterate the fact that this is a government which has brought in 2 budgets, which has stabilized the finances, where government is being funded well, where we have reduced the debt to GDP ratio from 90% in 2022 to 78%. This is what you call prudent financial management, Mr. Speaker, not the kind of management that we had seen. And let me complete this for her information, because I don't like to go back, but the stupidity of the question requires me to do that, Mr. Speaker said. So you look at 2018. 2018, 10.6 million redeployed from Head 50 from ongoing rehabilitation and construction of schools damaged by TC Winston. There is 2018, 2019, 2021, and I can give you all the examples of redeployment of Biman of funds from capital expenditure. That's your question. That's your question. So, Mr. Speaker said, the honourable member, the statement she put out, it was all designed to create this impression of somehow Ministry of Education is not managing its budget properly, or somehow Fiji Police is not managing its budget properly. Mr. Speaker said there are always in a budget, every government has that. That is why those provisions are there in the Financial Management Act. That is why there is redeployment. That is why there is virement. Because you can have a disaster, for example. You can have unplanned expenditure. You can have capital expenditure not being undertaken because of weather conditions. And therefore, governments look at where they can reallocate funds within a particular year. They know that. They know that. But still, they're asking about why are you deploying funds? Why are you buying funds? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Yes, Honorable